Hi, everyone. My name is Melanie. I am the national spokesperson for the Tiny House Alliance USA. And I am here today with my good friend Nancy. And Nancy has a tiny house on wheels. She's going to tell us a little bit about that. So, Nancy, why don't you tell us how you got started in the tiny world and what type of tiny house you have and all the good stuff. Tell us all the good stuff.
Should I give out all the bad stuff?
Yeah, yeah, tell us that too.
Hi, Melanie. It's really great talking to you. And hi, everybody in the tiny house community. Um, we tinies have to stick together. And I started looking into the tiny house as an ADU, what's known as an accessory dwelling unit. And that's kind of the preferred term if you're trying to do it within a community or a town or not out in the boonies or the sticks or off grid. And why I looked into it was because I have um, a number of chronic diseases that will probably progress in the future. And I do have people who help me out. But at some point in time, I'll probably need full-time care. And I wanted to be able to accommodate them and have that be something that I can offer someone in the future. My
Yeah,
house
that's
is up.
fantastic. I don't think people realize when you put a tiny house in a backyard, how that can help for long-term care or even traveling nurses and the use of them outside of being just a second home in somebody's backyard. And that's what I really like about what you've done.
Right. And it also gives a sense of separation and privacy to anyone who would use that accommodation. I mean,
Absolutely.
I could have added onto my house if I wanted to, but when it comes down to it, you can have a whole separate living situation for at least what it costs to add on to an existing structure and probably less.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and movable in the future, like, if you wanted to take it somewhere, you could. You if you ended up wanting to sell the house and move the tiny house somewhere, that option is available, for the next person or, whatever. There's so many facets to how that can work.
right, you can add that structure onto your property and it doesn't necessarily have to convey with the next owner. It can
Right.
be something you take with you. So
Mhm.
it's really very long term and very future thinking to have a structure like that on the property. Now,
So what size is the tiny house that you ended up putting in your backyard? And you're in Virginia with me. So,
lucky
because
us.
that's how we met. And it's difficult in Virginia to do anything with tiny houses on wheels. So why don't you tell us the size of your house and kind of what the process was to get that to be allowed in your backyard?
Right. My tiny house is 9 by 20,
Okay.
and the process started because I had seen a notification where my town was the first and so far only one in the county that was going to permit accessory dwelling units on a main property. So the main living area has to be on the same property, and it's within your property limits. And then you can add that as an accessory. That
Okay.
grants permission to hook your tiny house into existing public utilities so
Right.
that you can hook the tiny house into your electric, your water, your sewer, which relieves a lot of the anxiety about having to set it up for off grid or for its own services.
Right. And then you just had to be permitted for all of those to be able to hook to your actual house, right?
Yes, it hooks into the same system. I had to be
Yep.
permitted first through the town and then through the county. And so
Oh,
here's the
good.
one of the major pieces of advice I can give to anyone is that if you're looking to find out what the permissions and zoning regulations are to get a tiny house onto your property, whether it stays on wheels or whether you have to take it off the wheels, is to look for the lowest level of bureaucracy that you're going to have to deal with and start with them first. So I was very lucky in that the town, which gives permission and had some framework of regulations, does permit it, whereas the county didn't really have any hard and fast regulations in place. But
Right.
because the town did, I was able to go through with the process and validate the process.
Right. And, most of us never, we get into the tiny house on wheels world and we're like, okay, this is going to be fun, it's going to be exciting, and there's all these new experiences about building and designing and all the cool stuff, and most of us have never done any of that. But then we're kind of faced with now we have to go and deal with these officials and people that we would have never in a million years talked to probably before about much, if anything. um how did you feel? What advice would you give somebody, or how did you feel about going and talking to these people and maybe not knowing what to say because you never done it before? Because me too. Me too. Like, I've never really
Well, not that
called them
not
up.
I wasn't the only one who hadn't done it before. The county hadn't done it before.
Right,
They had no. They're still evolving on their regulations. So
right.
and I was able to. Luckily, I live in a really small town. It's still a town, but it's around 900 people. And I also happen
Yeah.
to live next door to the mayor, so it's not like I can sneak a tiny house into my backyard.
Oh, come on. You can't go stealth mode with him next door.
But I'm also right down the street and also on first name basis with all the town officials and stuff. So we had a very positive interaction in email and on the phone back and forth. And they encouraged me and they pointed me in the right direction about what processes to go to through the county. They also sent emails on my behalf to the county.
See,
Another problem was, which might be a unique problem, is I was doing this through the pandemic.
yeah,
So very often people weren't, county officials were not in their offices, were on remote, or nobody knew who they were or where they were.
right,
So so very often I'd be handed off to a different person every time and might have to start the whole explanation over again or get a different answer from a different person.
right.
So
Yeah,
that can be really frustrating.
and that's the thing, is that most of them are not prepared or have the knowledge around what is happening and, getting bounced around, but they are willing to listen and they are willing to work with you. And I mean, I know there's a lot of people that try in their county saying no, and that has to do with regulation and stuff, not necessarily like the person not wanting to help you or give you the best information they have available. But you had a really positive experience working with your town. I
Well,
had
here's what happened. I went as far and I did I got the permits for connecting to the utilities through the town. That was
uh-huh.
all settled. And I got as far as I could after a few interactions with the county, realized that they were not set up to handle me as an
Yeah.
individual. So what I did was once I realized that it was difficult getting someone with the county, I hired a general contractor to finish the project. So that general
Mm,
contractor did all the utility connections for me and all the permittings with the county for me.
nice.
So so and they had their hands full trying to get everything sorted, but they handled. I was going to have to get a general contractor anyway because I couldn't actually hook up all the sewers and water myself. So I said, let me get them a little early in the process and get them to handle the permitting as well.
And
So
then
they
how
handled the.
much more did that cost you to have them come in? If you're going to hire them to do the work anyways, um, to put in all of the connections for you, how much more did it add for them having to take over that part of the permitting process? Was it a lot?
No, I don't think I had figured a package for the whole deal. So
Okay.
I sort of included that cost in my package and it cost 20,000 above the tiny house costs.
Okay. And then your tiny house was how much?
My tiny house was about 40,000.
So you're talking 60 grand roughly to put it,
60
and
grand and then also before you let your tiny house sit in your backyard or anywhere, make sure that um your soil is is compact
yeah, right? Yes.
because I had the tiny house delivered and the company set it up. They set up really nicely on piers and
Mhm.
we still had the wheel. I believe, yeah, we might have taken the axles off at that point, but we still had the. Wasn't too drastic,
Right.
and so they set it up and couple weeks go by and I'm looking out my back window and my house looks to me like it's crooked.
Oh no.
So at that point, I had a landscaper who was helping me do a lot of the infrastructure work, getting the driveway and stuff like that done. So we decided we needed to put a concrete pad underneath. So we had to
Right.
do that after the fact.
No.
So they had to bring in bobcats and lift it all up and put the pad in, and now it's fine. But definitely that is something also to find out beforehand to decide whether you're going to be able to just put it, on up on piers or something like that.
Yeah.
Leave it with the wheels on, or decide to go all out for a concrete pad, which I'm glad I did in the end.
Yeah, and so we've never been on a concrete pad and we've been in a backyard, a campground, and now on our own property. We do want to put in a pad, but we haven't made it that far because we had to do all this tear down work and figure out where we're going to actually end up putting our house because it's not in its permanent spot. But I know when we park our tiny and we lift it up, right? So it's not the tires aren't sitting anywhere where we put the concrete blocks, we dig out and we put in gravel, like pea gravel,
Uh-huh.
drainage rock, basically. And then we put the concrete blocks on top of that. So as the water comes down, the the drainage rocks are creating that barrier so that our house doesn't sink.
Right.
And so backyards, even in campgrounds, they do have a lot of like little sinking spots when people start parking for longer seasons.
Sure.
Or like when we were in our friend's backyard, we did that too. Because, and now we've been in this spot for 3 years and we're still sitting level on that.
That's great. Plus, we've had a fair
So,
amount of rain here in Virginia, so you would know
right.
by now.
And I'm pretty diligent, like, once or twice a year, I actually go get the 4-foot level, and I'm, like, laying on the floor. I'm like, "Are we okay?" I'm waiting for things to, like, start rolling
Start
across the
rolling in one direction.
countertops. But so far, that has been a really good way if you can't, because I will tell you, concrete pads are expensive, and we priced one out that and the cost of everything is ridiculous right now. But we priced one out as like a 4-inch 8 by 18 pad just to directly fit our house, and it was almost $4,000.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
about what they're
yeah.
asking. And you're really, not even in the most expensive part of Virginia.
No. And
The
so if you can't afford that, maybe in the interim, you could do the drainage rocks and make sure that you have some stability and then save up to put your pad in.
That could definitely work, and there are a lot of good resources. You don't necessarily have to go a whole hog through a general contractor or a contractor.
Right.
My landscape company has been very helpful in putting in a lot of the infrastructure for me, and I'm sure that they're not as expensive as someone who's like a full house contractor or a builder.
Oh,
So
yeah. That's, a good thing to know is that sometimes companies that aren't officially, contractor company doesn't mean that they still won't do other types of projects for you, like general maintenance projects to get things done. And we always think, oh, well, we have to hire this person and it's the only thing that they do. And a lot of times people in the trades have a ton of different skills and they
not only
connect
that,
to
I
people.
found that they were anxious to help out because they wanted to learn what's involved in working with tiny houses as well.
Right.
Because there's a lot of pent up interest around here where people can't get things going, but they are looking around for people to help them out.
Yes. And so now your mayor that's next door to you
Um,
has is
the
it
one
a
the
man
one
or
thing that
woman?
we a man,
Has
he's
he
run
come and
unopposed for
visited?
the last several terms because it's such a thankless task to be involved in small town politics.
Right. But has he
Um,
come over and seen the tiny house since you got it done?
oh, he sees it from his back deck. He can see it from his back deck. So,
No, I mean, like, has he come in it?
oh no, 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 they've been very,
Oh,
yeah, they've been very good. Once in a
okay.
while we'll have chats over the fence, etc.
Okay.
But I do have the backyard. My backyard, it's on my property, and it's
Right.
got about half an acre of land back. that it sits on, but the land is fully fenced in by like a sort of goat type fence about 4 foot high. And I have a separate entrance and a separate driveway. And I really want to make sure that my tenant has privacy and can come and go as they please.
Right. Because you're
I
renting
think
this out
security
right
is really
now.
important. Sorry?
Because you're currently renting it out right now.
Yes, I have it
Yeah.
on a 1 year lease. And the town also likes to be, I need to let them know who's occupying it and what the occupancy status, because of course, they like to keep tabs on who's coming and going and things like that.
Right. And so they've taxed it as an ADU. Did they give you any setback requirements or like how big it was allowed to be per the size of your home or any pushback on stuff like that in trying to get it into the backyard?
No, I did. Uh, I think I think there's a certain percentage of the main home that it can be, but I didn't go anywhere near that. And we just
Right.
have the setback regulations were the same that would apply to a shed, which is like 5 feet away from the property line or something. But we didn't touch on
Nice.
any of those. Um, the only the only thing that they were adamant on, and I believe it's countywide. I live in kind of an upscale county, so they're really picky about what you can put on your residential land. Um, for example, if even if you have a travel trailer, you can't park it on your residential property. You have to park it
Wow.
elsewhere. Um, so I did have to remove the wheels.
Okay.
So I removed my landscape contractor did the pad for me. He removed the wheels and the axle, and they're sitting in his garage somewhere. But if I ever need to get it back on the wheels, I can put all that stuff back. It's not irreversible. And then we
Yeah,
put
and
some
that's
nice.
the thing that people don't even, we hear a lot, well, I want to be on wheels and I want to be able to move. And, I kind of went through this a little bit with my county too. They were like, why the wheels? Why the wheels? And it's kind of silly because like I can take my tires off and set them underneath the house and meet what their requirement is. And they're like, yay, now you're permanent. And I'm thinking, like, we could literally just put the wheels back on and leave. Like, it really doesn't create
I
any
know, or you could
more
even I
permanency.
mean, we put a nice skirting on so it looks nice
Yeah,
underneath. You could
right.
you could put the wheels on and keep the skirting on and they wouldn't really know.
Yeah. And I mean, my wheels are on and I'm skirted and I have my little boxes that cover them up to protect them and everything. And so if you drove by, you wouldn't see, it just sitting here on wheels, but I could pull that skirting and roll if in an emergency if I had to. Um, and I think it's so silly. And I know that they're trying to do it to make it make them feel like it's a permanent thing that can be real property, right? When we
Right.
get into real estate terms, right? Real property doesn't move. It's built, it's stuck to the ground, but even taking these off doesn't mean that you can't
It's,
move them. Like it's, and you just kind of I kind of looked at my building inspector. It was like, okay, well, I mean, we could take the wheels off, but they can go right back on.
I think
It doesn't change
off,
anything.
once it goes off the wheels, once the wheels are off, it's considered that it's subject to all sorts of building codes and regulations. I think that's the issue, which means
Right,
that the county comes and inspects. And we had all the electrical inspection and the water inspection. We had all that go through.
right.
So that might be part of the issue. I wouldn't say that the only nothing disastrous happened during this whole period of time. Like I said, we had to go back and redo a few things. It was a learning situation.
Yeah,
The worst part of it was how long it took. It took about 9 months to build the house, which was a little longer than I expected, but I think it probably took maybe almost about a year and a half from the time I contracted on the house
right,
and the time everything was set up and working. It took that long to be up and running and connected and things like that. So you
right,
need to plan a time frame that works for you in terms of your budgeting your time and your money.
right. Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, we built ours, so it was 7 days, which was like crazy.
Well,
So we're
you
like,
guys were
yeah,
crazy.
we're done. I don't know what the problem is. But I
You
mean, we
broke that
were,
system. They won't even let you go down there and do that anymore.
no. And we were done, like, we had a functional home coming out of that in 7 days, but we were not done in the fact that we still had to, like, paint and stain and, do all of the decorating work and, make it the whole outside and inside and caulking and sealing and so and still, even if you're building it, I mean, it's functional. We were living in it,
Right.
but we were living in it, then having to polyurethane the walls and, do all of the caulking outside. And so there's still a lot of work that comes even if you build it quickly. Like,
What did you find with things like setting up your utilities? Did you find that the first time you set things up, they worked great? Did you find you had to go back and tweak things because things stopped working the way they should? I found that in a couple in the with the heating and with the hot water. I found that we hadn't
so I think
we
the
did
one
things the way
we
we were told, but we weren't getting the results we wanted, so we had to tweak things.
Yeah, I think our hot water heater, um, we've had a that's been disastrous for us, like, since day one. And we have an on-demand hot water heater, and we've had a couple problems. One is just the product that we used, but then two is that the on-demand hot water heaters require a certain amount of water pressure for them to actually work properly. So
Yes.
when we were in the backyard, we were running off a 100-foot water hose from the host house to the tiny. Well, there was no water pressure left. So it would get hot, then it would go away, get hot, go away. And then we had to add in a jet pump and a water system and a pressure tank. And there was a lot of playing around with that to get it to really work right for us. And it was frustrating because it was winter and I was so sick of cold showers.
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't wanna deal with it, and, John was frustrated, and I'm like, "I'm just gonna go to the gym and take a shower," because I was so irritated with, like, "Am I gonna get a hot or cold shower today?" And, we've learned over time how to work those a little bit better, and now we have a different on-demand hot water heater, not the brand that we originally bought.
Hmm.
The electric has been good. I haven't had issues with electric hookups, and, I mean, the septic is just our gray water. So those are
Okay.
really the only three things because we don't have internet or cable or any other hookups into the tiny. Were you having problems with the water or
We had problems with the hot water system,
hot
and it
water?
turns out that the hot water on demand, I don't know what brand it is, but if it's the same as
Right,
yours, but it's a question of communication between like the propane supply company and the manufacturer, and
right.
the propane supply had installed the wrong regulator on it, and it was doing the on and off thing, and I had to have them come out and install a different regulator.
And
So
those
there are all
regulators
these.
fail. We've had 2 regulators fail in 5 years, and there was nothing wrong with our whole system, and we're troubleshooting everything else, and it's this little regulator, like, at the end of the
I
day, and you're
know,
just like,
and you don't. That's the kind of
"Ah!"
thing you don't know until it happens.
Right.
But everybody's been really all the companies that I have that service it. I've got my own HVAC company that comes out regularly, my own plumber, my own electrician. I mean, I've got a whole squad of people who support me in my main house, and they're also really helpful with the tiny house. I
What
didn't
I
find
love
anyone
is
who
that
objected to working on.
you have
So,
contractors that show up. Like, I ha contractors hate me, I don't know why, but I have had the worst time and, getting anybody to come and help me at all. And
yeah.
did you struggle finding these people or how how?
I was lucky with a couple of them, and so I stick to them. I don't shop around for the cheapest one, or I find someone good, and if they prove they're helpful and reliable, then I stick with them. But it's
Okay,
like that up here too. It's really a struggle to find a good contractor who stays good. One contractor will be really good, and then everybody will discover that, and then they'll get really busy, and then it'll be hard to get hold of them. But um,
yeah.
I can't emphasize enough, especially if you're planning on renting it out. I feel an obligation to my tenant to make sure that their hot water's on. If they were mine and theirs was both out, I would be feel obligated to make sure they had their hot water above me. So I really
Right.
keep on top of that. But I found as a homeowner, um, something's always there. I've always got some contractor or another coming in to fix something. It's just it's
Right.
just like, you know, it's just what entails having
And
property.
we're kind of completely different because we haven't found a lot of contractors. One, they're also busy is the thing, and there's very few in our area. And so we've
Yeah.
had to just, for some things that we maybe didn't want to do, we've had to just do it. Like we had to repair our own well because I can't get anybody to come out here and I'm not waiting for a month to be able to get water.
Oh wow.
And oh yeah, we had a part of our casement break and we dug it out and fixed it ourselves. And I'm like, those are not repairs that a lot of people would want to do, but so struggling to get anybody to come or even just return a call. um it's been that's been the most frustrating to me, is just not having anybody to call for help.
Oh,
And
that might be the one disadvantage of the if you just have the time. For example, if you called someone and said, "Hey, the toilet's not working in my tiny house," they'd say, "Tiny house,"
right,
but these are people who know I have the main house, and I always give them work through having a quote unquote regular house.
right,
So they're happy to come out and accommodate me on the tiny house work. But I
right.
think it must be a struggle to get people to take a tiny house seriously.
Well, this was like a well company. It didn't even have anything to do
Oh
with
wow,
the house. It had to
wow.
do with the well on the property.
Hmm.
Um, and you just can't. Yeah. So I know the trades are really hard right now, but it's
So
part of the
definitely,
process.
the moral of this story is definitely find a reliable builder,
Yeah.
one who is hopefully close to you who can resolve your issues, and one who is willing to work with you past the sale.
Right.
Do you know
Yeah.
what the status is of how are builders for time frames and taking on work these days? What's the general general state of the market?
From what I've heard recently, it is busy. A lot of builders are really booked out in homes, and a lot of tiny house builders I think are smaller. So if you're working with a smaller builder, they maybe build 5, 10 houses a year or something, and they may not have the capacity to go bigger. Some of them are trying to get into bigger warehouses to accommodate more people coming into the marketplace, especially now because a lot of banks are starting to do financing with the tiny houses, and that's opening up the door for a lot more people that people who just couldn't pay cash before now have an option to get in. So, and they have to go to the builders that are giving them that financing, and so those builders are really starting to get slammed. And yeah, they're busy. I think across the board it's pretty busy, and I think you put that in with affordable housing and housing crisis, and rent costs being through the roof and housing costs being through the roof, and people are looking for alternative ways, and this is an affordable alternative way, especially with financing coming in, and
Yes,
we'll need more of it. Like we need a lot more of it.
yeah.
But
Well, I definitely
um
say Virginia may be a picky state, but it's definitely worthwhile putting the effort into getting your tiny house through.
yes.
Number one, because it can be a great source of of comfort if you have family members who need a place to stay, if you have caretakers who need a place to stay. It can be a source of extra income if you plan to rent it out. But as long as you cooperate with your local zoning regulations and access them the best way you can, either through your town or through a contractor or on your own, if you have the time and patience and the
Well, yeah,
resources.
and Virginia is one of the ones that, so we have passed Appendix Q for 2018 in the and 2021 in the building codes, and that doesn't always pertain to wheels, but it does start opening up the door for cities and counties to understand smaller structures, right? Because
Right,
there is some building code framework for smaller structures on a foundation. And so when you open a door for that, and the county, like my county, I believe just got off of the 2015 building code on to the 2018, and now we're in 2023. So these are always so far behind. But I think when you start opening doors with building codes, even though they don't pertain to tiny houses on wheels, it cities and counties can adopt and create their own one-on-one, special permitting allowed in certain areas because of things that exist, and it gives them some understanding of it. And before that, there was very little understanding with building officials and, zoning departments. But I think now they're starting to see it in some aspects. So even if your state doesn't have anything for tiny houses on wheels, you can take them these types of building codes and other things, and they can work with you. If they want to work with you, they can work with you to make exceptions to for these types of dwellings. And that's really
Ye-
important for people to understand, is it doesn't
Yes, the
always
first
have to
person who
be
calls
exactly
will be the
for
one
us.
who the first person who calls will be the one who starts to create the awareness that this is an issue, and we
Right.
need to have some sort of framework to go about allowing these things.
Yeah. And the more people that call, and the more people that are requesting, and the more people that are asking for information, then the more research those zoning departments and planning departments are going to go out and start doing to figure out how to make it work, which is important too, because they understand there's housing problems and cost of living problems. So it opens new avenues that they may have never even considered just because you put in a call.
Right,
um
and no matter how you feel at any point in the process, they are not there to make your life miserable. They are
right.
there to make sure that the
Yes.
zoning rules, which are for the good of everyone, that the zoning rules are enforced. They just need to catch up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've worked with some of the most amazing people, and even the most amazing people in counties that still have no acceptance for this, but are still so interested in it and keeping it on a back burner because they're like, hey, let's do something. And they want to, but they have that paper, check, check, check. And they can lose their jobs, like, they can get in trouble. So they have to be careful about what they do too, and it's not always a personal attack. I think we just don't deal with them in that way enough to understand why we're getting the answers of no all the time.
Right,
And
and they might not be the final ruling in the issue, so they very often can't give you an answer right away.
exactly, and they have to go through their people. Like, my zoning official actually had to start bringing in the county attorney, because
Mm.
she's like, "Hey, look, this is above and beyond what my scope is in this, and I need an attorney to step in." Um, and sometimes they have to do that, and it takes longer, and it's nerve-wracking to go through
It
this
can be,
process.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you had, like, advice for somebody going tiny now, knowing that we have financing, knowing that zoning officials are a little bit more open than maybe when you and I started, um, and have some more information, what would you tell somebody who is like, I really want to do this, I don't know how to get started, I don't know what to do?
I would say start with the size you want, the budget you think you will have, and whether you want it, whether it's going to be on grid or off grid, and as an accessory unit or on a standalone piece of property. And in terms of the budget, I would prepare to go around 10% above what you think your budget will be without panicking. If it goes more than that, you can panic, but be
Right.
prepared. Give yourself
Yeah.
a 10% margin and give yourself a little grace. And the people who are working with you, give them some grace because everybody's trying.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great advice, and I do agree, and I would add maybe go 20% above right now just because of inflation, and, like, never knowing what's gonna happen, because some of this
Right. You
pricing
can
is
go
getting.
between 10 and 20 and panic, but you can go to
Yeah.
20.
Yeah. Um, and definitely give yourself time. I love that you break it down into like 3 or 4 sections. I think that that's so important, is like, find your house, find the basics of what you want, right? The size, where you want to put it, this and that, because all of it grows from those 4 points that you just made. And yeah, I think that's excellent advice. So, well,
Well,
thank you,
I often say,
Nancy.
and find good sources of advice. Melanie was very helpful and even held my hand a few times when I was freaking out during the
Oh,
process. So
well,
if you can
thank
find
you for
someone like
that.
Melanie, that'd be great too.
Yeah, connect with people who are living this lifestyle and doing it because we've been through it, and I think that's part of the reason that I want to share and do these talks is because we need people, we need connections to other people who have taken these steps or struggled or and it is important that we stick together in this tiny house world. It matters. Thank you. So, but yeah, I appreciate you coming on, Nancy, and I'm not sure when this one is gonna actually post and go live, so I'll share that with you once it does. But
Okay, and if
um,
anyone has any questions, they can let you know and you can forward them to me.
okay,
Thanks for the
I
opportunity
appreciate
to be
that.
able to share my experiences and hopefully pass along the torch.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And of course, you can leave comments below in on the YouTube and we will respond to those as well. And look forward to the next tiny house talk that we're having. So thank you, Nancy, for joining today and sharing a little bit about your tiny house experience. And we will catch up soon.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right, bye, honey.